Session 9.2. We're going to talk about Mongoose CRUD and queries. So we've already been talking about Mongoose already, as we know it's a wrapper around MongoDB and gives you a bunch of great stuff that we already looked at. Basically recapping that we have a schema first, and then it generates a model of that MongoDB document, and on that model it has a whole bunch of really great features that we can use. So we're gonna get a little deeper. We're gonna talk about the CRUD operations in the query. Those are the extra features onto that model. We're gonna talk about the CRUD operations in the query, and we're gonna demonstrate it inside of an application, so we can actually see some of this in work. So we have the Mongoose model. I'm jumping fast. Forget that. That was a technical glitch there. So we got the create methods again. There's documentation on them all. I'm just going to mention a few. There's save, which does what it says. It inserts a record in the collection using the model object. There's insert many, and create. So these are used to insert arrays. So I used insert many when I wanted to do some sample data for one of the previous labs. I just grabbed a whole, like 20 restaurant records in an array, one shot, insert many. It was great. It did it all. I personally use create a lot when I'm inserting data. Insert one does exactly what it says, but it's faster than save. So you pick and choose whichever one you feel comfortable with at that time. But there's a lot of different options, and there's a lot of different things that you can do with them. So these are the create methods, the C part of the CRUD operations. And again, if you look down here, you create your model. On your model, you have a save method, and then this dot then and dot catch is handling promises. If you don't know what a promise is, it defers the execution to a point in time it may not trigger right away, but it may be delayed, but when it comes back, it's going to come back and you're going to be able to handle that. So you can move on and do other things. Basically, it's kind of a synchronous way of handling the save instead of a synchronous way. You fire the save method, it goes and does what it needs to do, and then it comes back at a later time, either with the data response, or it'll come back with an error. Again, once we get more into the promises, there's actually two states. There's a result and rejected, and you handle both of them. But we'll get into that if you're not familiar with that later on. So update methods do what they say. Updates record based on collection. Now, some people do two steps. It depends on how much control you want. Sometimes they'll use a query to find it, and when they get the record in the callback, they will actually update it. They'll do what they need to do. So what's great is Mongoose has some compound methods that basically take two operations and do it at the same time. So it's a combination of read and update. So find one and update in one call. Find by ID, which is a little shorter. You find by the record based on the ID, and you update that. Same thing. It has usually update. Maybe it has a query here. So this is the filter. This is the filtering for large and the name, and then you have the callback error for callback function that then it'll go and then modify it in that function. So, but some interesting things to know in the response, you'll have on that object, you'll have the modified count, which will actually track how many records in a DB that was updated. Very good for debugging. You can output that for your own to know how many records you affected. And then just looking at this a little bit, I will never ask somebody, what is the options here? What is the signature of model.update looks like? I would never ask somebody about that because I forget syntax. Always look at the documentation, always. So I mean, I'm more interested to know, do you know, what an error first callback is? How do these methods work? In what kind of way, and kind of explaining and understanding how to use them inside of node.js. So first step, we have a model and we require it into our module. It's a student model. Here we do things a little bit more, you know, clearer. We set a variable for a condition, and we say it's Captain Jack. We have an update operation where we're going to take the city and we're going to change it to Montreal, and then we're going to call our update with the condition, which right here, instead of inline, maybe this is a little bit more. It depends on you, right? Developing this might be clearer to you or not. it'll say, okay, I'm going to update Captain Jack, and then when I'm going to do that, I'm going to set his city to Montreal, and after that, this callback function with the error first will give me the error, the numbers affected, and the raw response. Alternatively, we can still do the two-step here on the bottom. We can find the record in the callback. We can set the city on the document directly, and then we can save it. So there's two steps there. However you want, how you can mix and match however you want to use these different methods. The delete method does what it says. You delete a document based on a condition. Then you can do delete many. Again, it can remove all documents given them a filter. So delete one, just delete the size large, error first callback, check the error, otherwise there's not going to be much return back. There's not going to be a collection return back from the delete method. Remove is another one. So again, remove as conditions in a callback. First you get the model, the student model, you handle the remove. If you wanted to, use some of the filtering there, there's a filter on registration date is greater than reg date. Now, if you notice, the greater than equal is those operators we talked about. So those short form GDE with the $sign here, that's the logical operator for this query. That's how you do that. So, but there's also another thing to note is you can without a callback function here, you basically defer the execution to a later time. So you get back a query object. That query object can be passed around. It can be executed whenever you want to do it. So you can basically defer the execution, control when you want to do it, and the way you do it is query.exec. So if you were to translate this to SQL, this statement would say delete from student where registration is greater than or equal to the registration date. If you look at some of these things, we're looking ahead a little bit, but it has a bunch of operations here. If you can see how many there are, there's a lot of them. You can see the different control you have and choice as opposed to just vanilla MongoDB. You have a lot more static helpers to help you with all these things, and there's a lot of options too, just for querying and CRUD operations. So I'm going to quickly look at a demo, and I'll explain that to you in a second. And we're going to just load it up here, and let me just grab it so I'm not wasting. All right, so just looking at a little bit of application and code because slides by themselves are a little boring, right? We need to see how this works. So I created a little page here, and what it does is it uses socket.io, and it tracks the connect and disconnect. So we can connect and we can disconnect, and we can actually get information back from the socket.io. So if I click get restaurants, it'll go back and it'll give me a list of restaurant data. And if I were to just do that, I can actually grab the JSON data from the back end. And I have what that translates to is this Mongo compass. So you can see I have this. This is basically this is an interface to my MongoDB. So if I click on orders, you can see the JSON documents here, and we can actually look at that in that way. It's a collection of documents. So you can see I have data in there. I have city, I have cuisine, I have name, and I have a collection of seed data from a previous session. So I want to query that. I have this order table, but I don't have anything in there yet. I don't need to create this up front. If you don't have a collection and you try to save, it'll automatically save for you. So what I want to do is I want to try to pull that to the top using socket.io, and when I do that, so when I click get orders, as you can see in my console window, there's an empty list. When I go place an order, it says server disconnected, but let's really see if that's true. Maybe it did. So I need to connect, and I need to place an order. I need to, oh, you know what? It's probably throwing an error, and we'll have to see why. All right, so what happened here? So it actually did fail because it said order create dot then. So what I wanted to do, let's go try to see what's happening here. So what I did is on the UI, I have my socket.io connections set up. So in the jQuery, there's a ready function, which is on ready. And I use this nice library, socket.io, to create a connection on localhost port 8080, which is the server. I set up my listeners on connect, disconnect, and this one's an older one, so I can get rid of it. And then I set up a couple listeners here. So I set up when data is returned from the server. So when the restaurant data is triggered, it will output it. I also set up a listener from the server that when order data is received, it'll output the order data to the console window. And then I'm going to add something now that's going to say when order data is added. Just I don't really need data actually. Just I could probably remove that. Just say the order data the order was added by the server. So those are listeners, and then the buttons themselves, they're just simple JavaScript. You know, when I click one of these, I expect to call a function, and the tiny functions are here, and all they do is emit across the channel and the socket the named events. So these should match up to server names, get restaurant, get orders, and add order, and that's pretty much the UI. So then if I go look at the server now, let's just take a look at the server code. All right, on the server code, server.js, for the node server, I go, when I start my server, I create my listeners. Connection, I create these listeners and I don't need message anymore because we're not actually using this one anymore. So I can get rid of that. So it tracks an event disconnect and it console logs disconnected. It tracks the restaurants again, review. Console logs out that this was called, and then it uses the restaurant Mongoose model, and on it has a find object with an error for its callback. So it goes, and because we have no filters here, we're basically doing this. So it's saying find all. So grab everything from the database, select star from restaurants, return everything. And then if there's an error, I console log that. Otherwise, and I use a lot of console logs for my own debugging so I can see what's happening. I just output what was found, and then I do a little bit of a map, and I changed it a little bit because I wanted to map it to a JSON object or more of an object literal. So I mapped everything, and I just wanted to pull out the name, the cuisine, and the city. And then the trick here is when I emit back up to the client, I do JSON.stringify. So JSON.stringify allows me to pass back a JSON object, and then I can work with that instead of an array of objects that the client has to then stringify itself or handle. I just basically turn back the JSON object. So that's a good little tip for your UI development or the caller to give it in a nice format for them or whoever's calling. So then I go to do the same thing for get orders. I have this order. So let's look at this next step, or backing up a few steps. First, you need to create the schema before you can use the order. So I created an order with the Mongoose. So I require Mongoose, then I create the schema, and then my schema looks like this. So it's an item, just an item name, which is a string, a customer name, which is a string, and I require it. I also have a type. The type could be pickup or takeout or whatever, what have you, but it's not required. If you see, it's kind of optional. So then I use this special line here, the secret sauce line that basically sets everything up for you. I instantiate the model, I pass in my schema in the table, and then I got this wrapper. This ODM is in this object document mapper has now mapped this for me, and now I have an order model that I can export to the world, and I have all that functionality attached to it. Step 2 is in the server at the top. I require my order model. So now I have my order model within my server code, and I can use it alongside, as we already reviewed, the connection to MongoDB. And now we can actually go ahead and use it a little bit. All right, so now we have this order model. We can, inside this get orders, we can do the dot find. Again, there is no, at this point, we don't know enough to add some complicated queries. So we have an empty query. Not empty, but basically is a placeholder for everything. So we have that placeholder for everything, and now we're gonna call it in that way. All right, must have been a bird in the background. I have my window open, and you know what? There's a lot of noise going on. This isn't gonna be a perfect video, so we're gonna have to put up with the background noise. Could be a little funny at times, but we're gonna go with it. So that's what that is. So hopefully we don't hear too much. We don't hear screaming, but we'll go with it if it happens. So all right, so we have this trigger here for socket.io when the add order comes in. Now we have this order model, and we have a create. So on the create, it takes an object that you want to create. So we have a document object here, and I have the customer Tony Soprano and a salami sandwich. And then we have the once it goes and persists to the database. I have a promise, and it's going to go ahead and emit back that that it was added. So what was happening before is it was throwing it on this because there's also there's a dot then to catch the resolved promise, and then there's also a way to catch the rejected promise. So we can say catch here. This is what it was. So it had no error. So let's try to save this and run this again. So when I go to run this, let's run it. Okay, it's going to open up the ports and all that. It says it find. Okay, so it triggered some old calls. So let's go to the UI. Let's clear this out and say go get the orders. They're empty. Oh, there's one. Let me place an order. Okay, order was placed by the server. Place it again, and then we get orders. So now we have more there. You can tell. So I don't know what Tony Soprano's favorite sandwich is. I think it's calabrese or something like that. But I hard coded that customer. So I'm gonna add a few more hard coded ones for the example. And what I want to do next is show how you could filter out using query operators inside of the Mongo find method. All right. All right. Some quick overview of some of the queries we got. So we have the find, which is again does what it says, has conditions, has fields, has options, and we'll see how this we can look at our app, our small app, and start to add some where filters or a little bit more filters of that find instead of returning everything. So it's pretty much what it says. It fetches from the database. If you don't use it with the callback, you get the query object to defer the execution to a later time, which means that you can pass the query object around, then do a .exec on it. If you use a callback, it executes right away. If you don't use a callback, you delay the execution to a later time whenever you trigger it. Find is equal to select all from students in T-SQL. And when you are using this find filter down at the bottom here, so find, and then you have a parameter, say name Captain Jack from Pirates of the Caribbean, it translates down to select star from students where name equals Captain Jack. So here's no callback here. It defers the execution to a query method, and you can use that later on using .exec. If you have a callback, error first callback, it executes right away. So the find gets triggered, and then whenever it comes back, the callback gets handled. With callbacks, and then you have a query condition. So here, this bracket here, name Captain Jack, will find every student that has that name. If there's many or one, doesn't matter, and then it will return that execution. So you can actually do that with the find, and you can also use find one and find by ID. We already talked about that. So find one finds exactly one record, so the limit of one. And find by ID is a very short form that just handles the ID. So no callback. Again, you can query it and execute it in this way, and then you can just find one with this filter here. So find one will probably just return the first object in the collection, the first document, and this one will have conditions on it, Blackbeard. This one is find by ID, so we can actually find a model by the ID, and we trigger that, and it turns the student that matches the ID. We can also chain it this way, student.findByID.exec and the callback. But I don't know why you would do that. It's better just to do it. It's better just to do a callback method then, if you're gonna execute it in that way. Some query selectors, again, we already talked about these previously with MongoDB. They're exactly the same. Equals, greater than, equal, in, less than, equal to, or not in. And you can use them inside, as in the age is greater than 20. Logical query operators and or, not, nor, or. So those are what they say. The only thing is you have to actually use this in an array with multiple conditions. I don't like all those brackets. It's painful to me to close them up. There's a better way to do that, but that's how you can do that in MongoDB and also in Mongoose. And you have this where clause, as where is what it says it is, where, and in alternative to find. So you can actually have this find method here, but you can also chain them with the where clause, which is really great because now you don't have to worry about the find operation here. You don't worry about all these brackets. So you can say where age greater than or equal to, and then exec all of that and throw an error. And you can chain multiple wheres together, which is really nice. Where age, and then do some filtering, and then also do another chain of where city is Toronto, and then you can keep doing multiple chaining of wheres, which is really great. because then you don't have to worry about the brackets. I like that much better. And that's the last slide. I'm going to go back quickly and look in the app and how we can better do that. Someone's probably messaging me. Someone's probably sending me a message, so let me answer that, and I'll bring up the code in just 1 second. If we quickly just wanted to go back to this example here and quickly show how we can use some of those filter operators and query operators. I updated it so that if I get orders, I add a bit more data here. So I have Tony Soprano. I love these mob names. They're pretty funny actually. Johnny 2 times, he has a cannoli. Pistol Pete has a steak and cheese, and TikTok has liver and onions. That doesn't sound too great right now. And then basically I mapped the return to just include name and item. Same with restaurants. So we have the full list of restaurants. So actually what I'm doing here is I'm filtering out the restaurant. So if we go to the get orders quickly, we'll quickly find this out. We are returning everything. So what I want to do is, because I'm using this find keyword, it's empty. It's basically an empty filter, so it returns all. So if you see I have a condition here, and this is the condition. It is where customer equals TikTok and his item is liver and onions. So if I remove this find empty condition and I put in that variable, now this is just for clarity of code. You can put that big object inside of the find statement yourself, but I think it's a little bit more clear what I'm doing here. So when that rebuilds, Mongoose now will execute the find with those conditions, and then of course do the callback and return the data, go through this mapping here, and then return the JSON string. So if I go back to the interface here, clear this out, I go to get orders. So now it's returning just one record TikTok with item liver and onions. Okay, so I did the same thing for get restaurants because get restaurants was returning the full amount. So here get restaurant returns 2 of them. I guess no, it's actually, I haven't filtered it yet, so that's good. So it's returning the full list. So if I go back to the code here, I go back to the get restaurant part here. So what I did is I have this query instead of the find as we did in the other with the query condition as we did previously. We're using the where clause here. So we're saying where, which I like better because you don't have to worry about brackets, where city equals Queens. So if we go back to the list, you can see those are all of the restaurants where they're in Queens, and yeah, it's probably better like that. So we have Bruno on the Boulevard in Queens, Big Tony Sandwiches, and the Godfather's Panini Express. Okay, so, but we want to filter now. We want to filter on the name, but what we want to do is use like a like wildcard. So I didn't know how to do this myself. I was interested. So I looked it up quickly. And what you need to do is, the good thing is you can chain the where clauses. So you can do dot where, right? So I already have this already baked. So you can say where name, and you use this regex key. So if you don't know what regex is, it's regular expressions. You have to look it on their documentation to tell you to do that. So it's saying here where the city is equal to Queens, and where the name is like, and wildcarding big. So when we do this, we're actually filtering the one record down, clear this out, and now we do get restaurants, and now we just get the one record that we want. So we talked about Mongoose CRUD operations and how you can use create, update, delete. We talked about the filtering and how you can use the operators, and how you don't necessarily need to use the find all the time. You can also use the chaining and using where, the dot where clause. If you one thing to note is once you use that where clause, one thing I didn't note is you need to stack these chaining where, but at the end here you need to do the exec, right? So now you're doing execute with the callback. So that's one thing you need to really remember. But I like this option better because I can see what the filtering is. I don't have to worry about all the brackets and parentheses and stuff like that. So we talked about Mongoose. We talked about MongoDB, and next we're going to talk about. I think we're moving on to React next, so that'll be a good one. So all right, thank you very much.